In this video, I'm gonna talk about Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2. Welcome back to the grim darkness of the future, where war has become the most common atomic element on the periodic table. Everybody is fighting everybody, and that includes themselves. This time, you get to play one of the big boys. You get to be one of the buff, hyper-masculine towers of pure beef, whose lifelong career is to be a man. Case in point, pink is not available as an armor color. Fans of the Hangzhou Spark will have to find another banner to fly in this one. The story is as follows. You're the guy from the previous game, except that the previous game was a full century ago. The previous game ended on a bad ending no matter what you did, but all of a sudden, that bad ending no longer counts, and you're right back in your place of honor with just a slap on the wrist and a stern talk to show for it. You have to get through at least half of the campaign before the story delivers a bit more context about your state of affairs. And by then, you probably forgot why you even got put back on the A-team in the first place. If you can look past that, you'll be happy to know that you're about to fight chaos again. Might as well make it a staple of 40k at this point. Just like Mega Man X fighting Sigma, doesn't matter what you're up against, you're always ultimately getting Sigma as the final boss, and he was the mastermind behind it all along. Same here. So, the controls are weird. Left mouse button to shoot, right mouse button for melee, you aim using the middle mouse button, and then you've got some other accessory but still very important controls scattered somewhere on the keyboard in places I can't remember. If you want to do yourself a favor, you might want to change that. The community recommendation is left mouse button to shoot, right mouse button to aim, middle mouse button for execution moves. If you've got side buttons, I use the front one for melee and the rear one for parrying. These are all the important controls. It's one of those games where you actually do want more than two buttons on your mouse, because there's a lot going on in the heat of battle. Fortunately, once you get comfortable with this, you really get to feel like the main character of an epic story. There's a big tour de force here at hand, and it's a game that looks like a movie. The attention to cinematic detail is just balls to the wall. You can tell that a whole lot of pains had been taken to make this experience as immersive as possible, and yet it's possible to live through this movie just like a video game, without all the little bits of frustrating bullshit that used to come with the experience. Anybody remember Flashback? Another World? Prince of Persia, but before that Sands of Time thing. Remember when they called these games cinematic platformers? You controlled a guy who had been rotoscoped from somebody moving in real life, the animation work was fantastic, the storytelling was second to none, and the controls were dog shit. I hope you really meant to press these two buttons just now, because your dude is about to perform a 10-meter sprint and he's not stopping until he's done it. You had to be careful in everything you did, and it was fine if you were just navigating the world, but it made the combat sequences devolve into fighting against the controls more than against anybody or anything on screen. Because, here's the thing, back in the day, animation cancels didn't really exist as a concept. Street Fighter 2 had just come out, everybody loved it, the game played fluidly beyond comprehension, but I don't think that anybody had nailed down the proper term for what was going on. You were controlling people with a whole lot of beautiful, detailed animation frames, and yet they moved as fast as anybody in a run-and-gun platformer. Somebody, somewhere, had figured out that the controller was an intermediate step between your reaction time and what you wanted your guy on the screen to do. In real life, if you change your mind in the middle of a movement, you can just course correct on the fly. It's a reflex. It's part of the human starter kit. If you want to do that in a video game, you have to register that your guy is doing something you don't want him to do, figure out which button to push to make him do something else, and then hope to God that your guy got your new input in time. That was mostly taken for granted in classical platformers because movement was always instantaneous. That was more of a problem in cinematic platformers because your guy would always commit to the input and there was no way out of it. And even today, when a game wants to give you that movie feel, it loves to do it by making the controls clunky in a similar way. Your Space Marine? He can block an attack anytime. Doesn't matter what he's up to. As long as he isn't getting bowled over, he's in a position to stop whatever he's up to and parry an incoming attack. That's the bread and butter. Mastering the art of parrying is the difference between life and death, full stop. And thank God you can animation cancel into a parry, because if you couldn't, you'd be in for a much more frustrating experience. Go figure why, though. You can't always animation cancel into a dodge. The problematic at hand with this is that there are some specific attacks that can't be parried and you need to dodge them. That's where learning the enemy patterns comes into play. If you've played Dark Souls before, that's going to be familiar territory for you. If you're like me, and Dark Souls is a sorry footnote in your video game history next to multiple tombstones, I have some news for you. Your learning starts today. It's going to be just like driving stick. Your buddy put a post-it on the tachometer, you're gonna stall the engine a bunch of times, but you're gonna get it eventually, and you'll feel like the best damn triumph and the coolest motherfucker on the planet once you've nailed it down good and proper. I completely forgot to check up on my playtime after I beat the main campaign, but I eyeball it at about a dozen hours. The campaign itself serves mostly as a primer to introduce you to most aspects of the game and to get you ready for the multiplayer modes. That said, it's possible to play the campaign in co-op with some friends, but the AI is usually competent enough that having actual humans controlling them is not a necessity by even a long shot. The operations mode is the co-op meat and potatoes, and the interesting part is that it gets you to do the things that had gotten a mention in the main campaign, and might have left you puzzled as to why stuff is inexplicably going right or wrong somewhere close enough to get in your radio chatter, but far enough that you can't see it. There's a part early on in which a splinter team is set to go stall for time by lighting a big fire in the middle of a horde of bugs. It feels like useless fluff until you realize that one of the available operations is that exact little plot point, and that you're now actually doing what it was getting just a passing mention in the campaign. It's a neat way to connect the dots, even if the payoff isn't immediately noticeable. There's one thing to get used to, though, and it's that some of the mechanics seen in the campaign get modified in the operations to provide some balance between the classes. The big-ass heavy gun that you could find in the campaign is now an entire class in operations. The jetpack that you could use willy-nilly in the campaign is now a signature special ability of another class in the operations, meaning that you can now use the jetpack only once every 300 years. The tactical class gets a scanner ability, which allows you to figure out what that random weird-ass green ball was in the campaign. The one thing I don't understand is that there's a lot of loading. You join the lobby, that's a loading. Somebody leaves the lobby, that's a loading. Victory screen, somehow, that's a loading. Getting back to the main menu, that's a loading too. Quitting the game, you bet your gluteus maximus that's a loading, I'm not even kidding. I have no idea what the game is supposed to load when you're trying to do the exact opposite of loading after you're done for the day. Somebody please fix that, this makes no sense. The difficulty levels in the operations range from hard to impossible, but that's chiefly because I have the reflexes of a grandpa and learning how to parry the attacks was a baptism by fire that left me medium well done. Turns out, parrying isn't just when a blue circle shows up on your screen. You can parry pretty much whenever somebody winds up for an attack. If you take the hit, you lose a point of armor. If you parry the hit, you regain a point of armor. If you shoot that enemy after the parry, you get yet another point of armor. If you do an execution, you know it, point of armor. Basically, you're riding the razor the whole way through. If you do well, you're practically invincible. If you get off your rhythm for a half second though, things can go very south very quickly. Kicking the challenge level up a notch mostly makes the going south part even more brutal whenever it happens. It also makes the sequences where you're desperately rolling around like a Dark Souls character a lot longer. That said, there is an interest in trying for the hardest difficulty you can. For one, it brings bigger rewards, but nobody needed me to tell them that. For another, it unlocks more powerful versions of your equipment, and you won't be able to get them fully upgraded if you stick at the lower difficulty levels. And for a third part, the higher levels give you mini-boss encounters that don't exist at the lower levels, and these are worth doing just for the excitement alone. For a fourth part, the teammates tend to get better as the challenge goes up. Once you get used to the game, you can pretty much run off and do whatever on your own if you're overpowered for your level, but when you're at the appropriate challenge level, you'll understand pretty quickly that you have to stick with your teammates or else you'll make like an incel and die alone and forgotten. I haven't gone beyond the middle difficulty level, but already at this one, the players tend to be a lot more conscious about working as a coordinated team. You probably won't do all that great on your first operation. There are a whole lot of important but undocumented little details and things that can really make the difference once you learn about them. Things like how the bulwark shield will parry if you tap the button, but block if you hold it. Things like the heavy's aim making him unable to perform a dodge. Maybe that wasn't a tutorial message somewhere and I forgot about it. If somebody's playing the game for the first time, please let me know. There's also a PvP mode, by the way. I did not play the PvP mode. Making your Space Marine into your own guy is pretty easy, and the customization options open up wider with time and experience. It's funny because the classes are not generic classes, but rather actual characters with a name and a personality. You can pretty much tell which class is next to you in a mission just by hearing the way they speak. The basic options are varied enough for the most part, but if you want access to every last paint chip like you're trying to 100% Gran Turismo, you're gonna have to pony up some cash for the DLC or Season Pass or whatever games as a service bullshit is going on these days. The Season Pass costs about as much as buying the game a second time just for the sake of having access to purple as a color choice. Let's get real, if you're at a level where you need to work in order to live, then you don't need a DLC. I'm thinking back on what led me here. If it hadn't been for the operations mode, I would have done the campaign, put the game away, and never really looked at it again. The operations didn't just keep me going. They pushed me to get better. They encouraged me to step up my skills. That was the year for me. Stepping up my skills. I learned a whole lot of new stuff at my day job. It was hard sometimes, but I made it through, and now that's another skill set to add to my toolkit. I learned some new tricks with video editing, chiefly by running out of patience while putting together the We Are Lawyer movie. That project took upwards of a year, at least 2 months to choose the bits to get into the final product, and then 8 months of painstakingly animating sprites to indicate who the hell was talking on the Discord call. I'm incredibly proud of the final product, and I am never doing this again. That was a whole lot more than I could chew. It would have been more doable in a vacuum, but with life and the universe and everything happening at the same time, I had stretched myself a little thinner than I would have liked sometimes. But hey, it's done. It's out there, and I can find some sense of accomplishment in having completed what I think is my biggest personal project to date. It's one of those things that doesn't kill me and makes me stronger. I'm starting to really catch on to what people meant when they said always be learning. It sounds like the stupidest thing in the universe after you just got out of school and you've spent something like 12 to 16 years of your life doing just that. You got the diploma, now you can stop going over your books and having heart attacks over tests and due dates, and you can start to actually get paid for all the work you've done. No more listening to speeches delivered by a teacher with all the personality and charisma of a refrigerator. It takes a while to build the habit again. Turns out, learning doesn't require listening to a teacher with all the personality and charisma of a refrigerator. It can be checking out the reference book. It can be a set of practical exercises. If you're getting a job, no matter what, you're learning, because the job's always gonna have something or other that you've never seen before. If you're playing any video game, you're learning. You're learning how to build your deck and choose your cards. You're learning how to predict your opponent. You're learning the enemy patterns. You're learning which units are best at doing what. You're learning whether or not you can take that corner at full speed. You're learning how to get better. If I can blame school for anything, it's for beating the desire to learn out of me. If there's a potential resolution to be had for the new year, it's that of learning something new. Not just read a book about it, but put it into practice too. Getting your hands dirty. Proving to yourself that you can do it. Rising up to the challenge and conquering it. If it's a proper challenge, then the payoff is going to be worth it. It's going to be something that you can feel in your innermost depths. Doesn't need to be a world-changing endeavor. In fact, choose the right thing, knowing that you'll be doing it and not just reading about it. Manage your own expectations. Choose something bite-sized, and if it turned out to be too small, then it means you've got the opportunity to take another bite. It's the end of the year, so now's your opportunity to finish it off on a good note by improving a little something somewhere. Sit down with your budget, see if you want to make any adjustments. Take a hard look at each expense and decide on whether or not it has to continue as it does. Open up and clean out that one closet you'd been meaning to do for months. Get rid of the subscriptions you haven't used all year. Clean sweep your feed and get rid of everybody who's telling you the world is about to blow up. They told you that last year, and the year before, and the decade before that. You're still alive. You get to live each of your days and fill them with yourself. Follow the people who thank you for watching and who hope that you have a great day. Gather your strength and take on your world with a newfound energy. Take some time to yourself and have some happy holidays by all means necessary. In short, this game is the eye of the tiger.